He left her with a text and stole her money, but couldn't believe it when she appeared as a witness at his trial. Dear viewers, welcome to our channel. Subscribe to receive more stories every day. The text came at 3:14 a.m. It's over. Don't look for me. Sophia blinked at the glowing screen, her mind sluggish from sleep. The words didn't register at first. She sat up, rubbing her eyes, and read it again. Mo. She fumbled for the lamp switch, casting warm light across the bedroom they had shared. His side of the bed was empty. A pit formed in her stomach. She swung her legs over the edge, her bare feet hitting the cold hardwood floor. The closet doors stood open, a few empty hangers swaying from where his suits had been. His shoes were gone. His watch was missing from the nightstand. A sick realization hit her. She practically stumbled to the dresser, yanking open the top drawer. The envelope with her emergency cash. Her laptop bag. Missing. Her hands shook as she reached for her phone, opening her banking app. Her heart nearly stopped. Her savings account, the money she had painstakingly built for years, the money she had planned to use to start her own business, drained. A cold wave of dread crashed over her. Ethan was gone, and he had taken everything with him. The days that followed were a blur of panic and disbelief. Sophia filed a police report, but the officer barely concealed his apathy. Boyfriend troubles, ma'am, he had muttered, as if she had lost a pet, not her life savings. Her landlord wasn't sympathetic either. Rent's due in 2 weeks. I don't do extensions. Her job at the law office, where she worked as a paralegal while saving up for law school, barely covered her rent. She had no family to turn to, no safety net. Ethan had obliterated everything she had worked for in a single night. For days, she sat on her mattress in their now half-empty apartment, staring at the space where his things had been. She wasn't just heartbroken. She was furious. How could she have been so blind? How had she not seen the signs? But there was no time to wallow. If there was one thing she had learned from working in law, it was that justice wasn't served to those who waited. Had to be taken. Sophia didn't waste another tear on Ethan. Instead, she channeled everything into clawing her way back. She picked up extra shifts at the law firm, barely sleeping as she pored over case files, soaking in every detail like a sponge. She wouldn't just recover, she would rise. Years passed, and she worked her way up, gaining respect in the firm. Her focus sharpened, her resolve unbreakable. One evening, while reviewing cases for an upcoming trial, a familiar name appeared in her stack of files. Ethan Carter. She stilled, the air in her lungs turning to ice. The case. Fraud. Multiple counts. He had swindled not just her, but dozens of women, conning them out of their savings before vanishing. The prosecution was building a case, but they needed witnesses. Sophia's hands clenched around the file. This was it. Her chance. The courthouse bustled with activity the morning of Ethan's trial. Sophia stood in the hallway outside the courtroom, waiting to be called in. She had spent years preparing for this moment. Years working through the anger, the humiliation. She wouldn't be the victim anymore. She adjusted her blazer, keeping her posture poised. She had earned her seat at this table. Inside, she could hear the judge calling the case. Then the moment came. The prosecution calls its next witness. Sophia Wells. Sophia took a deep breath, stepped forward, and walked into the courtroom. Ethan's smug confidence evaporated the moment their eyes met. He hadn't seen this coming. Sophia stepped into the courtroom with steady, measured steps, her heels clicking against the polished floor. The air was thick with tension. Prosecutors whispered among themselves, reporters scribbled notes, and in the middle of it all, Ethan sat at the defendant's table, lounging with an air of confidence. But the moment his gaze landed on her, something in his expression faltered. His posture stiffened, his smirk flickered, and for the first time since she had known him, she saw something unfamiliar in his eyes, fear. Sophia didn't look away. She held his gaze as she made her way to the witness stand, gripping the railing as she took her oath. The judge's voice was a distant echo, the legal formalities blending into background noise. All she could hear was her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. Ethan recovered quickly, leaning toward his attorney and whispering something. He was always good at pretending, good at acting like he was untouchable. But she knew the truth. He had always been a coward. The prosecutor approached, flipping through his notes before looking at her. "Miss Wells, can you please state your relationship to the defendant?" She took a slow breath. "He was my fiancé." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Ethan's lawyer stood. "Objection, Your Honor. Irrelevant." The judge barely glanced up. "Overruled." Sophia sat straighter. "I was engaged to Ethan Carter for 3 years. During that time, he manipulated me into believing we were building a future together. Then, one morning, I woke up to find that he had disappeared, leaving behind a message that simply said, 'It's over. Don't look for me.'" She exhaled, her voice steady. "Along with the text, he took everything I owned. My savings, my valuables, even my emergency fund. He drained my accounts, leaving me with nothing." The prosecutor stepped forward. "And did you ever recover any of those funds?" "No." Ethan's lawyer stood again. "Your Honor, my client maintains that any financial transactions between him and Miss Wells were voluntary. If she gave him access to her accounts, that was her decision." Sophia turned her head slowly, pinning the lawyer with a stare so sharp he actually hesitated. "I didn't give him access. He stole it." The prosecutor handed her a document. "Miss Wells, can you verify this as a copy of your financial statements from the week your accounts were emptied?" She took the papers, scanning them even though she already knew what they said. The withdrawals were there, one after another, bleeding her account dry. She lifted her head. "Yes." The prosecutor took the papers back and faced the judge. "Your Honor, this is just one example of the many financial crimes the defendant committed. He operated under multiple aliases, targeting women, convincing them of his devotion before systematically stealing their money. But Miss Wells is unique among the victims, because she's the only one who was able to track him down." The defense lawyer let out a forced laugh. "Tracked him down? You make it sound like some kind of revenge plot." Sophia tilted her chin. "Oh, not revenge. Justice." Ethan shifted uncomfortably, his cocky demeanor cracking just slightly. She knew what was running through his mind. How had she gone from the woman he abandoned to the one sitting here, testifying against him in open court? The prosecutor took a step forward. "Miss Wells, can you explain how you discovered the defendant's true identity and whereabouts?" She nodded. "After he left me, I struggled. But I refused to let him destroy my life. I worked at a law firm starting as a clerk, taking extra hours just to keep myself afloat. Over the years, I moved up the ranks, eventually working alongside investigators who specialized in fraud cases. One day, I saw a case file come across my desk with a familiar name. I thought it was a coincidence at first. It wasn't." She turned toward Ethan now, holding his gaze. "You were careless. You thought I was just another woman you could take from and disappear. But you left a trail, and I made sure to follow it." Ethan's mouth pressed into a tight line. The courtroom was silent. Even the judge seemed to lean forward just slightly. The prosecutor continued. "And during your investigation, did you uncover any evidence of Mr. Carter using multiple identities to commit similar crimes?" Sophia pulled out a folder. "Yes. I compiled records of bank accounts, aliases, and fraudulent transactions, all tied back to him." The prosecutor took the folder and held it up. "Your Honor, we submit this as further evidence of a pattern of criminal activity." The judge accepted the documents, and Ethan's lawyer sighed, rubbing his temples. It was clear he had underestimated the strength of the case against his client. Ethan finally spoke. "This is ridiculous. You're twisting everything. I didn't force anyone to give me money." Sophia stared at him, her voice deadly calm. "You didn't force me. You lied to me. You built a future with me not because you loved me but because I was useful to you. You stole from me just like you stole from all these other women. And now you want to pretend you're the victim." She let out a soft, humorless laugh. "You were always a good actor, Ethan. But even you can't talk your way out of this." Ethan's jaw clenched. He knew it too. The prosecutor looked satisfied. "No further questions, Your Honor." Sophia stepped down from the witness stand, but she didn't leave. She took a seat in the front row, her eyes never leaving Ethan as the case continued. For years she had imagined this moment, seeing him answer for what he had done, watching the arrogance drain from his face as he realized there was no way out. And as the prosecution continued to present evidence, as witness after witness came forward, as the judge denied every single one of the defense's objections, she saw it happen. Ethan was losing. It was only a matter of time before the verdict was delivered. But Sophia wasn't done yet. She had one final move to make. Ethan shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his confidence now a mere ghost of what it had been at the start of the trial. He stole glances toward his lawyer, but even the man paid to defend him looked weary, his shoulders sagging under the weight of the evidence stacking against his client. Sophia sat motionless in the front row, watching him unravel. She had waited years for this moment, and yet, the satisfaction she expected to feel wasn't as overwhelming as she'd imagined. Instead, there was only calm, a quiet certainty that justice was inevitable. The final witness, a forensic accountant, was wrapping up his testimony, confirming the trail of stolen funds, offshore accounts, and fraudulent transactions that traced directly back to Ethan. With each word, the walls around Ethan's carefully crafted life collapsed further. The judge turned toward the prosecution. "Does the state have any final evidence or statements before we proceed to closing arguments?" The prosecutor nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. We have one final piece of testimony, one that will provide irrefutable proof of the defendant's guilt." Ethan's lawyer sighed. "Another witness. Your Honor, the prosecution is dragging this out unnecessarily." The judge narrowed his eyes. "Counselor, your client has been accused of multi-million-dollar fraud spanning over a decade. I suggest you refrain from implying this court does not value thorough evidence." Sophia bit back a smile. The prosecutor lifted a hand. "We don't need to call another witness, Your Honor. Instead, we would like to submit an audio recording as evidence." Ethan stiffened. His lawyer turned to him, whispering something urgently. The prosecutor held up a flash drive. This recording was recovered from the defendant's personal storage cloud. It contains a conversation between Mr. Carter and one of his associates, detailing how he planned his escape, how he justified conning his victims, and most damningly, how he bragged that no one would ever catch him. Ethan lurched forward. "That's a lie." The judge pounded his gavel. "Mr. Carter, you will remain silent." But Ethan wasn't done. He turned to his lawyer, grabbing his arm. "You said there was no recording. You said." The lawyer jerked away, his patience snapping. "You told me there wasn't one." Sophia exhaled slowly. She had known this would be the moment Ethan truly realized he had lost. The recording played. At first, the courtroom was deathly silent. Then, Ethan's own voice filled the space. "These women are so desperate for love. It's like taking candy from a baby." Gasps rippled through the room. Sophia's hands curled into fists. "By the time they realize I'm gone, I've already drained their accounts. And the best part, they're too ashamed to even report it half the time." Ethan buried his face in his hands. His lawyer slumped back, knowing there was nothing left to argue. The prosecutor paused the recording and turned to the judge. "Your Honor, the state rests its case." The judge exhaled sharply, rubbing his temple as if physically restraining his disgust. "Court is adjourned until the jury reaches a verdict." As people began filing out of the courtroom, Ethan turned his gaze toward Sophia. For the first time since she had walked in, he looked desperate. He lunged forward, restrained only by the bailiff's firm grip. "Sophia, you can't let them do this. You know me. You know." She stood, stepping closer, her voice steady, unwavering. I thought I knew you, but the man I loved never existed, did he? He was just another one of your lies. Ethan shook his head wildly. We had something real. I made a mistake, but... No, Ethan, she interrupted, her voice razor sharp. You made a choice. And now you'll live with the consequences. She turned, walking away without a second glance. Hours later, the jury returned with their verdict. Guilty. On all counts. As the sentence was read, Sophia let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Ethan Carter, the man who had stolen her trust, her money, her sense of security, would spend the next 25 years in federal prison. It was over. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed her, eager to capture the woman who had brought down one of the most notorious con artists in recent history. But she didn't stay for interviews. She didn't need the spotlight. As she walked away, the sun warm on her skin, Sophia realized something profound. Ethan had once taken everything from her. But in the end, she had gained something far more valuable, her power back. And that was something he could never steal. Dear viewers, thank you for watching. If you like this story, please subscribe to our channel to receive more stories every day. Share with us what you think of this story and tell us where you're watching from.